The Haunted Christmas at Rosefield Plantation. In the misty hills of St. Mary, surrounded by dense tropical forest, stood the abandoned Rosefield Plantation. Once a thriving estate of sugar cane fields and bustling labor, it was now silent and foreboding, its decaying great house a dark silhouette against the night sky. During Christmas time, the nearby villages were alive with joy carols, food, and laughter filled the air. But no one ventured near Rosefield, especially not on Christmas Eve. It was whispered that the spirits of the enslaved, trapped by unspeakable cruelties, roamed freely on that night, seeking retribution or release. Ezekiel was a young man known for his daring. This Christmas his pockets were light, and he wanted to buy his mother a proper Christmas ham. He had heard that the pimento trees at Rosefield were still thriving, their berries valuable for the season's cooking and spice trades. Ignoring the village elder's warnings, Ezekiel decided to harvest from the abandoned plantation. Ezekiel, you mustn't go there, Miss Thelma said, her voice sharp with concern. She was the oldest woman in the village and known for her knowledge of local folklore. The Doppies at Rosefield are restless, and Christmas Eve is the worst time to disturb them. There is no joy there, only pain. I don't believe in such stories, Miss Thelma, Ezekiel replied, adjusting the cutlass slung over his shoulder. I'll be quick. I'll pick what I need and leave. The old woman's expression darkened. If you go, do not take more than you need. Do not damage the trees. And for heaven's sake, if you hear them, do not answer. Ezekiel laughed off her words and set out just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The plantation, bathed in the pale light of the full moon, looked more desolate than he had imagined. The cane fields were wild with overgrowth, and the great house loomed in the distance, its windows like dark, hollow eyes. He made his way to the pimento grove near the edge of the property. The trees were heavy with ripe berries, and Ezekiel set to work, humming a Christmas tune to drown out his unease. The air was still too still, as if the plantation itself were holding its breath. Then he heard it a faint melody carried on the breeze. It was not cheerful like the carols sung in the village. This was mournful, haunting, and filled with a deep sorrow. The voices were faint at first, growing louder until they seemed to come from all directions. Ezekiel froze, clutching his cutlass. He told himself it was just the wind. But then, from the shadows of the grove, figures began to emerge. They were translucent and ghostly, their forms flickering like candlelight. Men and women in tattered clothing, their faces lined with grief and anger. Chains draped across their spectral bodies, and their eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. Leading them was a woman, regal despite her worn appearance, her gaze piercing and full of sorrow. Why do you disturb us? She asked, her voice echoing like a distant bell. Ezekiel's mouth went dry. I didn't mean any harm, he stammered. I just came to gather some berries. The woman tilted her head, her expression unchanging. Do you know what was done here? She asked. The master tormented us every Christmas. He sang carols while we bled. He whipped us to the rhythm of drums. Even now, his cruelty binds us to this place. The other spirits murmured in agreement, their voices rising in a ghostly chorus. Ezekiel took a step back, his heart pounding. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice trembling. To free us, the woman said. She pointed to the largest pimento tree in the grove, its roots tangled with the earth like gnarled fingers. Beneath this tree lie our bones. The master buried us here so we could not leave, our suffering tied to this land. You must burn the tree and its roots, or we will remain trapped forever. Ezekiel hesitated. What about the master? He asked. Her gaze grew colder. His doppy walks the great house. He rejoices while we suffer. You must destroy the candle that anchors his power. Only then can we be free. Though every instinct told him to run, Ezekiel nodded. I'll do it, he said. I'll help you. He worked quickly, cutting down the pimento tree, while the doppies watched in silence. As he unearthed the roots, he uncovered a mass grave bones twisted and broken, still bound in rusted chains. A wave of grief swept over him, but he pressed on, dragging the wood to the clearing and building a pyre. Next he ventured to the great house. The air grew colder with every step, and the shadows seemed to shift and move. Inside, the grand hall was in ruins, yet at its center stood a single candle, its flame steady despite the draught. As Ezekiel approached, a deep, menacing voice filled the room. Who dares disturb my Christmas feast? The figure of the master appeared, his ghostly form glowing with malevolence. His face was twisted in a cruel smile, his eyes burning with dark power. You will join them, he snarled, lunging toward Ezekiel. Ezekiel grabbed the candle and ran. The master's howls echoed through the plantation as Ezekiel fled to the pyre. With trembling hands, he lit the pimento wood, throwing the candle into the flames. The fire roared to life, its smoke thick and fragrant. The spirits gathered around it, their forms shimmering in the light. The master appeared, his figure writhing and twisting as the flames consumed the candle's magic. With a final piercing scream, he vanished into the night. The spirits began to fade, their expressions softening. The woman looked at Ezekiel one last time. Thank you, she said, her voice no longer heavy with sorrow. You have given us peace. When Ezekiel returned to the village, he shared his story, and the villagers honored the spirits by lighting a fire of pimento wood every Christmas Eve. From that night on, Rosefield remained quiet, and though the plantation was left to the jungle, the story of its haunted Christmas served as a reminder of the pain hidden in the land and the courage it took to set it free.